All right, let's call this regular September area Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Can I get a roll call of the members, please?
Andy Bailey,
Here.
Grant Muller,
Here.
Stacy Pettigo,
Here.
Scott Hudsonsberger is absent at the moment, Chester Bankus,
Here.
and then staff Liz Titzel and Kat Bell, as well as attorney Jay Moore also present.
Good. Anybody have any corrections to the minutes from previous meeting?
I move we accept them as they are presented.
I'll second that.
Chester moved and Grant seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. So old business, we have a application CC dash 2024 dash 00851, docket number 24 dash 24 dash VA. It's a petition of Tracy Byrne. They're asking for 3 variances. We continued this in our August meeting, and we asked for a couple of things from the petitioner, which we've learned a little bit. Can you take us through those?
Yeah, I can. So just by way of brief review, not going through the whole staff report again, but we've got 3 variances that are being applied for. One is a lot size variance to be just a hair more than 3/4 of an acre instead of a full acre. One is decreasing a setback from a confined feeding. And the third one is decreasing a front setback from an existing access, just by way of reminder. And there were 3 things that the board had requested in order to come back and continue their discussion on this. The first was to request for the health department to be present or supply a recommendation. So when you come back around to that, Rodney Wan from the health department is here to be able to address any general septic questions or concerns beyond the things that we have reports on. And he was kind enough to make room in his schedule for our meeting tonight. Second, to check to see if there was enough room for a set-aside area. So the petitioner did go and do another set of soil tests and provided those to the health department. The health department has confirmed, and Rodney can speak in more detail on it, but there is an adequate set-aside area large enough for a complete new septic. That set-aside would have to be noted on the subdivision plat when it gets to that point. And then the farmer in the neighboring field has provided a written agreement to allow for an easement across his land to access a drainage tile. Since any replacement septic system would need a modern perimeter drain, it would have to go a different direction than the existing septic. So should the existing septic fail, there is a replacement site that is suitable for a functioning septic and an outlet available. And that neighbor did put that in writing. That was forwarded to you from Josh Ritchie. The third item was to consult with the county surveyor for drainage issues. So the county surveyor went out and looked at the site himself, and then he has software that allows him to look at, as some of you may have been in drainage board meetings, it lets him look at how well different soil absorbs moisture and how ponding occurs and those kinds of things. He has determined that even at the subdivision stage, this will not need to go to the drainage board. He has no concerns that it will drain, and he supplied, and we forwarded his map that kind of shows those different layers. So he has no concerns on drainage. Additionally, it was not included in your motion, but Chester Bankus had asked earlier today if we had happened to reach out to the fire departments just to get a little more clarification on the setback issue. So I reached out to Kevin Catron, who's the fire inspector, today to ask him about the codes, and I had forwarded to you an email from him. He noted that in the 2012 Indiana Building Code, that's International Building Code, IBC 705.5, before it was amended, your exterior wall had to be 10 foot from a lot line. It was recently amended, and now it needs to be 5 foot from the lot line, but you do have to add a fire resistance rating, which, like a 1 hour burn wall, is 2 layers of drywall with the seams not aligning, fully taped, as an example. So that usually is a gypsum board product. So anyway, I also checked the Unified Development Ordinance and Indiana Residential Code, which is actually the code that will govern houses. And I just gave you guys a brief write-up as requested, showing that there would be about 50-plus foot. I'm actually measuring closer to 60, but there's a 5-foot margin of error on GIS, so 50-foot plus between the corners of the two proposed and existing structures. Code from Kevin requires a 5-foot minimum, so it's more than 5 foot. The Unified Development Ordinance, depending on your district, requires side setbacks of anything from 5 foot to 50 foot. 50 is only the landfill district for landfill waste cells and how far they have to be from things. Heavy industrial has a 25-foot requirement. So this particular hearing's in the ag district. The setback requirement is 15 foot, which means 30 foot between structures. That exceeds the 5 foot with fire resistance or 10 foot without fire resistance that fire code requires. And then Indiana residential code, it's a little bit different because it also allows for things like townhouses, which are perfectly safe to construct. So it talks about if you get less than 5 foot, then you start having to add burn ratings, basically, on down to if you have a shared wall because you're 0 lot line, then you have to have a 1 hour burn rating, which is going to get into that multiple layers of gypsum board taped and no lining up seams. These structures will sit more than 5 foot apart, so no fire treatment will be required. But that noted, they're both residential. It's pretty likely they both have drywall inside of them. So they do have a burn rating that's larger than 0, although a single layer of drywall is not a 1 hour rating. So anyway, per the fire inspector and then the other codes that I'm able to reference that would apply, there is not a code violation or a fire concern that would be recognized by the state or international code to 2 buildings set back 50 foot from each other. So I did that at the request of the board, and I, wrote that up so you can read what the different items are for yourself. And then I did forward you Kevin's email where he notes that 5 foot setback being the requirement for Indiana.
Very good. Let's try to be brief. This is a continuation for this year, or for this case. So we've been presented some new information. Kind of speak to that tonight versus just the general comments that we made previous meeting. I think everybody's knows where we're at on this as far as what we heard last month. So let's try to speak to the new stuff that we've learned since we're continuing the case to, I guess, be mindful of everybody's time. Does the petitioner have anything to add to this? Okay. All right, I'll open it up to anybody else that would like to speak. And if you would, please approach the mic, say your name, and if you've got any information, please.
Do I need to say my name or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Blaine Barrett, kind of here for JKB Farms as well as Butts Family Limited Partnership, as well as myself. I guess I'm a little confused with, are we going to allow people to do whatever they want on their land, or are we not, right? Because my biggest issue is we let some of this go through, this becomes R1, and now all of a sudden our setbacks for grain systems and all this is like, what are we going to do? I mean, eventually we're going to get ours. I mean, we talk about the fact that we're here to protect the farmland, but yet at the same time, we are slowly devouring it. Like, if there's something that I want to do on my land, I got to be 1,320 feet away. So I'm perfectly fine with everybody, doing whatever they want on their land, but when it affects me, then I've got a problem with it, right? So, my biggest issue is if we allow this many housing units around farmland, farm properties, what are we going to do? I mean, eventually we're going to run ourselves out. So if I'm allowed to do whatever I want on my land, then everybody else should be too, vice versa. That's just the way I see it, right? Like, I don't care, but I want to be able to do what I want to do too.
The only thing for clarification I would note is nothing about the BZA ruling is changing the zoning of land. The density of the houses, not including this one, would already put it into a place where in a future zoning examination, we would look at the fact that whether or not we would want, intense ag in that little group of houses or not, that question of what way it goes. In terms of livestock, most counties now require special exceptions, these kinds of hearings, just to have animals anymore. We've chosen to have a reciprocal setback and leave it as a permitted use, but that's something that I suppose could be reexamined in the future. I've always been supportive of the permitted use in the ag district with setbacks to keep the peace, but it's admittedly not the way most counties do zoning anymore because of how much of the public looks at animal and grain operations. Philosophically, I think it's a good balance, but I understand, the points. I think we all share the concern about not wanting to lose agricultural ground. I think tearing down all the houses that are there would be a hard sell, to actually put that back to being farm ground. A lot of those predate, the rules. But the ground is not being zoned to residential by any action this board can take. They don't have that power. That would have to go through the county commissioners. And nobody has brought that kind of petition, so it would have to be in a zoning ordinance and map amendment, which we don't have on the table right now to consider on any level.
So like, what about like getting grandfathered in to those situations, right? Like if there's already, barn bins, whatever is there.
So that's what you are right now. It's not
Right.
called grandfathering because if you cease to operate and enough time goes by, no future person has the right to just reestablish it. But you are allowed to continue. That's why they need a variance from you, is because
Right.
you were there first.
Right.
And you predate. And if any of these other houses burnt down or had a tornado hit them or something else happened that took them out, they would also have to come for the same hearing because you predate. So that gives you certain rights. As long as you continue to be there, nobody can legally take that away from you.
But I can't build any closer.
Correct, but there's also a road there. So I guess I would point out, unless you're going to try to vacate the road with the county commissioners.
Yeah, but what if we go to
You
the
know.
west or to the east? Like if we go to the east with anything,
Yeah, so there is a house there. So if you expanded toward that house, then yeah, you would have a different conversation unless you bought the house out. And then if you own the house, then there's not a setback from it. But that house has been there a long time too. So,
Right.
that's just the situation between the two of you. Nothing about this hearing creates that.
right? Okay.
Likewise, if he wanted to tear down his house and then rebuild it, he'd have to come in and, it's just the way that process works.
Aaron Russell. I guess to kind of elaborate on that is our biggest concern between Jack, Blaine, and my wife and I all goes back to these setbacks. Last meeting, you talked about if they were to build one house there, then you guys would consider putting this into an R1 district. And
No.
it
What was mentioned is that there's
mentioned.
already a cluster of houses there that have less than 20 acres per house. So the way setbacks work between livestock and houses is if there's a house and livestock or a house and grain bins, then you have a certain setback. So you try to avoid creating new clusters or houses where there's not already houses. And then you look at the fact that where you have groups of houses over time, usually if 10,000 hogs built across the road from you, that might not be good for those houses' property values. And if there's a grouping of houses, maybe that's not the best thing to have 10,000 hogs and 5 or 6 houses right across the road from each other, as an example. So you start to look at how's the nature of how people have built changing over time. But no, this one house doesn't create that. The fact there's a group of houses already there.
Correct. And I believe
creates that
that's,
discussion.
you had mentioned, and I might be wrong, but I watched the meeting again, but it was discussed, adding another house here. There's future, we can look at making this an R1 district and protecting the homeowners now. So when we look at it, you know, if we want to do, if Jack or if Blaine or if I and my wife want to buy this confined space operation or add on to it, well, we own the house to the east, so we don't care. The ground behind the property is all owned by the family, so there's no issue there. But when the biggest issue is this R1 district, potential R1 district. And even if it's not an R1 district, you add in another homeowner that creates issues down the road. It may not be right there at the beginning. It may be one or two homeowners later that create the issue.
So I would note that certainly any of you can sell your houses, and frequently it's not the first person that lives in a house that creates a challenge. But in terms of the R1 district, for zoning districts to be changed, you would have to receive notice. There would be a large county process. If you all came in and said this isn't what you want, I can tell you firsthand, it's going to be pretty unlikely that anybody changes the district. That's a conversation between landowners and the county in that case. Right now, we don't even have a zoning map open to study. We just know that every 20 years or so, you re-examine comp plans, you look at development plans. One example, Frankfurt just annexed all the way out up to 65. That has huge implications and changes on zoning and other things that have to be discussed for the 100 and 150-year plans, you know, when you look forward. So those are communications two ways. To change a zoning district, notice has to be given, there has to be conversations, there's meetings. If you and your neighborhood don't see that as an advantage and you're on that borderline between houses, that's not something that anyone's likely to force. That's a conversation that occurs anywhere you have a grouping of houses to go. Has this reached a point where the residential need for protection exceeds? If the landowners there are saying, no, 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 you know, we want to have livestock, we don't want protection from CAFOs, you know, we're good. I could speak for myself. I'm not going to recommend that, you know, anyone fight uphill on a rezoning, but densities are part of that, so that's why it came up. So if what you're all expressing is you want to stay A1 and you're good, should you get notice that anything else is being considered, or when there's a comp plan and a zoning ordinance rewrite, express that. It's not likely to be something that becomes a controversial issue because it's about what's good for the land value for the people who live there. So if you're saying that's not good for you, that's heard. Like that's, you know, but that's not the nature of this hearing.
Okay, so you know, say these houses here, there's the people that live in these houses now may be okay with this confined space feeding operation or whatever, or, you know, they may not want the R1. But later on, you know, it goes to this R1 or whatever.
It won't go without support and a public process. State law prohibits that.
But when we go to a meeting to oppose it, and all the other homeowners are wanting this in an R1 district now, and you've got us over here that are the odd ones out.
I don't know what you're picturing as an R1 district, but I think all of you are pretty well here expressing an opinion.
but
there's only like
right.
5 houses there.
But I'm saying
It wouldn't go
those
across the whole
houses
county.
sell, those homeowners, those houses sell. Later on down the road, the owner of those homes, the new owner of those homes, now say, well, we want to make this an R1 district. We want to be protected.
So they would have to petition, there would have to be a hearing, and both the comprehensive plan and state law would discourage what's called a spot zoning, which means you zone one individual lot, and then the next lot something different, and the next lot something different, and the next lot something different. So I can tell you personally, I would not recommend negatively against zoning just one house, R1. That's not, I mean, that falls against everything in planning, so.
I'm not saying, like, it'd be that group of houses, right? This group of houses. Say we have new owners, this new
They would
group
have
of
the right to
houses.
petition, just as your neighbor across the road, if he decided he wanted a factory, could petition for
correct.
I-1. I mean, that's true to the end of time.
Correct. I understand that.
Well, and this house will have to have, once it goes, because this is gonna have to go to the area plan, right?
Correct, it's subject to the
And
subdivision
so there's
because of the
going to be a
division.
rural.
There's gonna be a rural protection clause that any
that-
future owners of this house
that-
are prohibited from taking any legal action against livestock, grain bins. It's why we require subdivisions for anything less than 20 acres since 1993.
But they still have the ability to rezone and make an R1 district.
You know, that's good, that's
Correct.
an interesting question, because that
So-
that covenant's still there.
Yeah.
And even if you rezone it,
Yeah, that
the
covenant does not
the
go
ag
away.
covenant is still
It's
there
in
and
the plat.
protects the farming operation that's
So
next to it.
you know, if that went to court, they'd have
Protects
no
it at
standing.
1,320 feet or like
No, you
what?
still, no, that doesn't change your setbacks.
No, it says you
Because
cannot
those
sue-
setbacks already exist.
Yeah,
So-
for everyone countywide.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what are those setbacks right now then?
It depends on the number of livestock. It's either 100, 660, or 1320. So if you have 10 or fewer animal units, an animal unit is not necessarily an animal. A beef cow is an animal unit. A dairy cow is 1.5 animal units. A chicken is 0.05 animal units. So you have to know species and then count up. But 10 or fewer is a 100-foot setback. If you're between 11 and 49, you're a 660-foot setback, which is the category we're dealing with now. If you're 50 or more animal units, then you're 1320. So all of your big CAFOs are the 1320. But people that have fewer than 50, so like in this case, we're not dealing with fewer than 50. We don't find it ever has been. And it's a blended confinement, pasture, and grazing. So you have the 660 setback that applies in this case both ways. Now, obviously, you've got legal nonconforming, so that sits in there too. Nobody's going to tell him he has to move over, and as long as the houses are there that have been there, they don't have to move either. If, you know, he has livestock, so he has a different situation, but if a house burns down, then yeah, you're going to be here
Okay.
asking for the same thing to rebuild.
And then I guess, on with these variances and passing variances and the request for the variance passes, made mention, everything that had been done on these lots prior to has always put this lot as non-conforming, correct?
I'm not sure what you're thinking I said. What I did say, and as accurate as this was originally a legal non-conforming lot, it was actually only a half acre. And had it remained that half acre, we wouldn't all be here, at least not for any of the stuff involving lot size, because it would, by law, like cattle and everything else, if it pre-existed, the lot continues. But it then came in common ownership with roughly 6 acres back behind it. Then it was redivided off as 3/4 of an acre, so no, it is no longer a legal non-conforming lot. That's why it has to get a lot size variance, because it is now larger, but it is not large enough, and it was bigger than the requirement at one time, because it had 6 acres attached to it. So it does not have a legal non-conforming status at this point. That's why it's here on the lot size variance question. Also why it's subject to the subdivision ordinance. Had it not come in common ownership, and then been redivided, it would simply be a legal non-conforming lot, and it would have a building permit by now.
Okay, so I guess just to kind of clarify things, so the lot, their lot, the lot beside the lot, was all owned, it was all one parcel.
Actually, it was the lot behind, not the lot beside. Now, I think at one time it was in
So-
with the lot beside, but the dates are earlier.
So,
Right, but it was the date at which it matters, they had already been divided from the lot beside. So you have certain dates at which something's legal non-conforming or something's not.
okay,
So they were all together, but it was before the rules applied, and that intersection was already separated and built.
okay. So I guess where I was going with that is, I guess, is I just want to get away from, a lot being non-conforming. Well, somebody adds a house or adds a trailer. Well, now it's non-conforming again, and we're right back in here trying to get a variance to pass to make it conforming. And it just seems like over time, that's kind of what has taken place is, now we're going to make it conforming, and then we're going to make it conforming again. And so the variances, there's 3 different variances that just, I don't know. I'm
No, I think that's a
frustrated.
valid point.
I'm very
you're
frustrated
fine.
because,
So
there's,
the only thing I wanted to clarify is what the rules say. The rest of your statement is opinion, and that I have nothing to say versus that either way. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that there's no rezoning happening, there's no requirement. My only interest as staff was just to clarify what the rules say. What your opinion is on conforming and legal non-conforming is, I have nothing to,
I was
that's
trying,
just something for the
trying to
board to
figure out,
discuss.
like, has this always been legal conforming? Has the
So,
up
owner?
until 77,
Ha-
it would have been 100% legal because there were no rules. And-
My question, yeah, okay.
So here,
And-
let me help a little bit. So first, this was a mobile home at the time. That no longer are we approving those.
Yeah, you can't have a single wide at
So
all.
you can't have a single wide at all.
Yeah.
So that takes that away. You know, I hear your points. A lot of them are the same points that we talked about at the previous meeting. I know you're trying to get some clarification
Yeah.
on some stuff. I would say that, you know, when we talk about the CFO, setback wise, there's so many houses in that one spot there that I don't think this is gonna restrict, even if we drew a map and we put a map against every single one of these houses. One of the other houses is gonna create a setback before this house is, because it's jammed right in the middle of the rest. The only one would be to the east, and I hear that. So.
But
I
he's
mean-
not in here wanting to rebuild right now, so that's,
Or to the west, sorry, yeah.
yeah. The houses on the same side of the road aren't, I mean, that's not before us to decide whether or not they should rebuild, but I agree, they would affect him a great deal more if one of them ceased to operate and wanted to reestablish.
That's the only place where the CFO issue even exists is to the west.
So I guess, you know, as looking at these, and, you know, we're in here for variances now. You know, anybody that wants to, you know, builds a house or whatever, wants to continue making improvements or whatever, are we gonna be in here every time to make a variance for this? And appeal it?
So if your house burns down, you cease to have your house, and you're within that 660, yes, you will have to come and ask permission to have a variance to sit within the setback. And if he objects and he has reasons, that conversation will have to be had very similarly to this, and some decision rendered based on the situation. I can't, BZA cases do not set precedents. They are each a case-by-case hearing, so I can't predict what any future case or its facts might be, or what people might come into the room with what concerns. Like, that's not within my, now, if you're adding on a bedroom on the back of your house, yeah, away from, you know, not going any closer to his cattle, no, you're not gonna be here because you're not increasing the nonconformity. But if you wanted to make a major addition on your house that went 30 foot closer to him, yes, you'd come in here for the same thing. And we'd be examining many of these same issues. And so yes, it does have an equal effect on all the houses. There's nothing that says that one lot is affected by the rules and no other lots. So as long as you're not getting closer to, you aren't here. You know, like him, you can expand further away, you're legal nonconforming with your setback. But if you want to make the legal nonconformity worse by moving closer, or if you cease to exist and you need to reestablish your use, then yeah, the rule, there's nothing that says that legal nonconforming situation, the rules apply to, but your legal nonconforming situation, the rules do not apply to. It doesn't, you know, zoning is equal in how it's, in fact, I would argue if it's not applied equally, it becomes a problem, because it shouldn't be about who the person is, it should be about what the rules say. So,
Correct, and that's
You know,
kind of what we're
and
hearing, and why.
so yes, you
the
would have the same
variances,
setback
that's why we're
issue.
trying to pass the variances, right, is because this states this, and if you want to go and do it, then you need a variance. That's why we're here.
yep, and so your answer, yes, you'd be in the same exact boat if
It-
you moved closer or your house burned down. You would also have to see if you could get permission.
Correct.
So-
So I guess to end
With
on
respect
that,
to the livestock, if you have more than an acre, you would not be in the same situation relative to the lot size variance. So
Okay.
it's, you know, each of these is a different
okay.
variance request.
So I guess to leave on that is, you know, it's not just one variance we're trying to pass, it's 3 variances with everybody around this parcel that is concerned, that doesn't, you know, think it should be through. So that's, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
My name's Eric Keith, and I am behind this lot, it's 6 acres. I've got a few questions. I understand that you said there was an approval for a perimeter drain across Mr. Ritchie's farm.
on Mr.
or on
Ritchie's.
Mr. Ritchie's farm, which if you go due east across to his field, which is there, that actually circles around and goes around my property into an open drain tile that comes and feeds that pond. That's something that I've dealt with. The water up, I can't even get to the backfield of my acreage. So that has something to do with an effect on me and my property. Another thing I'm curious is, would I have to come to the board if I decide, because I'm looking into retiring here. That's why I moved here. Would I have to come to the board to ask if I could have a cow on, or put up a fence along
you
that
are-
property line?
Are we talking one cow?
I might have 4,
Okay,
or 8,
so-
or whatever.
Well,
you know?
it matters, because if you're more than 10, you kick in a 660 setback, and you don't have that from your neighbors.
Right.
If you're fewer than 10, you're zoned agriculturally. If you're more than 100 foot from any neighboring house, you're fine.
Okay,
So, but if you, I mean, the numbers do matter, which is why I ask you. I don't want to give you the impression you can bring in 400 cattle and
Exactly.
you'll be
I don't think
fine.
I have room for
I'll
400
absolutely,
cattle,
if I get a
but-
complaint, find myself having to
I
send
understand.
my staff out. But no, you're zoned agriculturally for fewer than 10 animal units, a beef cow being one. Now, if you're talking dairy cattle and you're milking, they're 1.5 animal units. So
Right.
you're going to have to do the math differently.
Yeah,
But,
okay. I didn't know, because I'm
You've
curious
got to
and I'm
measure
trying to
100
figure
foot
out.
for any confinement area.
Okay.
Now, if it's pasture and grazing, meaning more than 75% of vegetative year-round, then you have a restriction on your animal units, but not a setback. So there's a
Okay.
trade-off.
Okay.
Across the street, we judge to be confinement because we can see where over the last few years he's had as many as 20, 25, and
Sure.
that's not green. 75%
Right.
vegetative is gonna look like a pasture. So like
Gotcha.
I have horses. You walk out there right now, my confinement areas are mud lots. They have a setback.
Right.
Now, I have a hayfield that goes up by the road, which I actually did come and get a variance for decades ago, but I don't run animals in it intensely. They graze on it maybe 10 days a year. It's 100% vegetative. It doesn't technically have a setback. So you'd be in the same boat. If you have
Okay.
6 acres and you fenced 5 acres in pasture and you only let them out when the grass was lush, but then you had an area where you have your hay
Confined,
and your
right.
confinement area and it's mud, the setback is from the confinement area. But if you put your cattle out and you don't pay attention, and having large hoof animals myself, and they mash all your grass down until it's all mud, well, now the setback kicks in, and now there's an issue if you fence that within 100 foot. So all that to say, think about your management. If you get to doing that and you have questions, call us.
Okay.
I work with livestock. I'm more than happy to sit down and
Okay.
help you figure out how to run things or manage things. Or if you're familiar with rotational grazing, you can use that to help preserve your vegetative amounts.
Right.
But that 100-foot setback is what you're gonna have to
Okay.
deal with.
Well, like I
You
say-
don't need approval for the use.
Okay, well, and like I say, one of my big concerns is the drainage for a perimeter drain's gonna need more water through that drain tile around the backside of my property and then back into the pond. So if there's heavy rains, which there have been, water sits out in the field all the time. So that's a big concern for me. The other one is basically down the road, like I say, they're looking to build a house. But are they really gonna build the house, or is it to sell the property to somebody that's unsuspecting? I don't know.
Well, I'll be honest, from a zoning
Does it really
perspective,
matter?
It does not matter, because
Great.
if it can sustain a septic, it can sustain a well, it has
Then it's a
drainage approval,
non-conforming and it'll be
and it's
legal.
subdivided and platted as buildable.
Sure.
Then it doesn't matter to us if you buy it and want to build a house on it.
Right.
If Joe Smo from California buys it, if he buys it, if
Anybody.
he builds a house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either suitable or it isn't.
Right.
It's not about,
That's why.
I mean,
Well,
it's not about who, I
Who,
guess,
right.
from
Okay.
a zoning perspective. So yes, if he chose not to build the house and he sold the property and had been properly platted and approved,
Right,
the buyer could come in and follow the same rules.
right. They wouldn't have to
and
come in
build
and
a
restart
house.
this whole process.
The only no,
Okay.
unless, now I will note, variances run with the
Yes.
land
Yeah, yeah.
2 years. So if he does not plat it, if it isn't subdivided,
Okay.
and more than 2 years go by, then variances do expire, and it would have to be reexamined.
Okay.
But if he subdivides it, acting on this to make it buildable, then he's acted on his variances, so then, at that point, he's
Gotcha.
got a buildable lot. So there's some nuances depending on what he does,
I
but,
saw- I see.
but it's not about him, it's about if it
Okay.
is buildable. Now, the only thing that could kick in is all of this study has been done for a 3-bedroom home. So Rodney can, I'm sure, speak to that more, but if somebody bought it and went, I want to put a 10-bedroom mansion there,
Then they'd have to.
well, they might not be able to get a septic at all,
Right.
so it could have,
Right.
I mean, there are things someone could do that
Okay.
could have an effect, but a
Right.
3-bedroom home is pretty average. I mean, I don't worry too much about someone selling a lot that can sustain a 3-bedroom home, so I don't know if that helps answer, but
Well,
but no, it's not about who, it's about whether
I
or not
agree
the
with,
lot
okay.
or the situation
And I understand
is.
that, but I would probably be the one that would be affected most because I could buy, I own the property behind it, which could sustain more houses. I don't plan on selling, but I will openly say to Tracy, who owns the property, if you're not gonna build a house, I'd like to have a conversation about buying that 3/4 acres.
And that's a totally different, I mean, it's
I just,
not up to
I'd
us
like
who
to have
owns
it,
what.
that's all I wanted
know.
to say. Thank you. I'm still against it.
Jay has to
I've got a
leave.
meeting in Kirkland I need to get to.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
I am Jack Barrett, and I'm the one that has the confinement barn across the road. I guess my main concern, I mean, we have always been good neighbors. We are the ones, my family are the ones that gave permission for the 3 houses across the road now that's been built, way before there was any zoning laws. The only thing that bothers me is, like Liz said at the last meeting, even if this goes through, I cannot add on to that barn without going through the same process as what he's going through right now. If I want to add on to the barn, get closer to what his house is, that's what bothers me. And we, in good faith, let everybody build the houses and all at that time. And because over time, these rules have changed and all this going on, and that's what I'm saying is why.
These setbacks have been in place since '77, so none of this is, the only thing that's changed is in 2006, we adopted the animal units and we loosened the setbacks for small number of animals. Used to be a flat 1/4 mile even if you had 1 chicken. So that change was made to loosen things in '06, recognizing that someone with 3 cows is not the same as someone with 10,000 hogs, but the reciprocal setbacks are in, going all the way back to early zoning. The county made a choice that instead of making livestock prohibited or a special exception and making ag a question mark, that instead houses would be the special exception and the setback would help keep the peace. So that part of it, if this house is denied, I mean, you still have that situation that's reciprocal. My only advice there would be work with your neighbors so that if you want to expand, they're supportive, and if they want to build
Correct.
onto their house, you're
But that's
supportive.
what I'm saying. Why would I say, yeah, it's fine, knowing that that's going to limit me, that I cannot build any closer if I want to add on to that barn?
Jack, let me interrupt just a little bit. So we're talking about variance number 2, obviously. When we look at the staff report, one of the suggestions by staff was, it says, we'll carry the condition that the petitioner will forego any objection to existing CFOs making expansion. So if you wanted to expand,
They would have agreed not to
They
object.
would
Now,
have
all your
agreed
other
not to.
neighbors could object, because let's be clear, you have other houses just as
Oh,
close
yeah,
or closer.
right.
Yeah.
But this
So
house
that's-
would have no right to object.
that would be in our motion and would be tied to that lot
Okay.
for
Because right now,
now.
we had tornado damage on the one end of the barn. We're only using the other part of the barn, but once we get it remodeled, or I just will need to know whether, if we decide that we want to go a little bit bigger to have more inside feeding,
Well, you also have areas where you feed hay and you water that are closer to this house than the barn, so
Yes.
this setback variance is from your outer fence, because we've noted your area's rove, so that was easier to do than trying to figure out exactly where you feed your hay and your setback is, but your barn is further away, so repairing your barn is still not gonna put you closer to than where your confinement areas are outdoors, where you have intense feeding.
Correct.
So I guess I would note, unless there's something I'm not understanding about the situation, it doesn't sound like you have an issue that would bring you to the BZA.
Barn further to the west.
If you moved the
To the
barn,
east.
yeah, if you moved the barn all the way east, closer than where your cattle have been running in confinement, yes, you would need. I mean, right now, this variance is
No,
bringing
it's
us to
still to the
80
east.
foot, so that's between your fence, your existing fence, and his house. So then if he wanted to move even closer than that, he'd have to come back. Your fence is there now, so you've got other houses sitting out there. If you decided you were gonna move your confinement areas all the way down, yeah, and reverse the whole thing, you would need to come talk to the
The
BZA.
confinement area is the fence.
Not necessarily. So the confinement area in a pasture, areas that are 75% or more vegetative do not have setbacks. Areas that have intense feeding in them do have setbacks. So we look at where do you feed, where do you water, where do the cattle gather. When I looked through, I was seeing them kind of across the middle of the field. It looks like all of us, you're taking round bales out and you're putting them, in an area where the cattle can gather around. I did not see anything where you were actually up all the way in that corner. So
No.
at some point, we're gonna have a conversation to go, was that really confinement? Now, what we told them on their side is we're gonna measure from the fence because we don't want you traipsing across the middle of a cow pasture. We can measure that from the
Aerial view.
GIS, and we
Yep.
know it's a worst-case scenario. If that's what we discuss, there is no possibility it's closer than that because there is a road. But I would also say to you in reverse, I don't actually believe, nor did I see any evidence that you had hay bales, waterers, or barns in the corner 80 foot from his house. So before you got to that corner, we'd be talking about needing to get a variance. But if you're contending where you're moving, we'd need to look at what the flyovers show, where you're wanting to expand to, and it's gonna be that no closer rule. So, I can clearly show you've had confinement areas out partway across that pasture without any question. So, I guess I'd say bring your plans. If you're wanting to put the barn over on the corner closest to his house, you still have a 50-foot setback from the road. So you're not gonna be able to sit at
No,
80
it-
unless you
it
also
just-
get a setback.
If I
from the
do
road.
anything, I just want to, make the barn maybe a little bit larger going to the east, but I'm only talking a few feet.
If it's attached
It'd
to the
still be
barn,
within
you have areas
the
of
area I'm saying,
confinement that you've been feeding hay and watering in that are further east than the barn. So I don't know how I'd have to see your site plan, but just visualizing it, I'm not seeing how you'd get closer than where you've been feeding hay and water out in the pasture.
I don't think it would be, no.
No, so then you would not need to come to get a variance because you're not getting closer. The fact, it's not about the building, it's about the confinement areas.
Okay.
So like all my dry lots for horses are confinement areas, even though there are no structures within them. So, and when there end up being disputes, then we have to pull historical flyovers and look to see what's happened and try to work our way through it. But I guess I can tell you transparently, the corner of that fence 80 foot from his house does not in any way appear to have been used as a confinement area
Correct.
right there. So I would maintain that at some point before you hit, and you have a 50-foot setback from the road, you'd also be too close to with the barn. So, you have to work within. There's a point at which you need a variance, but what you're describing going east a few feet, based on what I'm picturing of having looked at your pasture and where you put your round bales and where your cattle are gathering and
Be
making
within the
mud,
same area.
you're not closer. You're not getting closer than what that already is, so that's gonna protect your legal nonconforming footprint. And, but this particular house is gonna waive the right to object if they have to agree to that, if the board were to move forward, if the board wants to have that condition. If they won't agree to it, then, the board has to examine that. So your issue in that case, if this were to get approved, that condition is going to be your other neighbors and their opinions, because they're not bound by anything that would forbid them from objecting. Likewise, at the subdivision stage, they will have to, according to the zoning ordinance, accept covenants that prohibit them from complaining about any normal agricultural activity and winning in court. Now, that does not protect you if you go and pour chemicals down their well. Like, it doesn't protect for gross negligence. But things that you would normally do, your cattle lowing in the morning, your tractor running to take a round bale out, dust, normal stuff, they now legally have given up those rights in exchange for building in the ag district, which is something that we've done since '93 to try to put ag first. Your other neighbors, however, predate that. So I guess I'd
Right.
point out your
Yeah,
concerns are valid,
We gave
but
them
they're,
permission back
you know,
when they built the homes, which
you know,
was a long
but,
time.
he mentioned future owners, that's always something that you may have to contend with if you're getting closer or they're getting closer.
And these are all, have been new owners since
Yeah.
we give permission.
And
to
most people who
to
move into Clinton County, it's rural, but But anyway, I hope that adds some clarification to how that works.
Okay.
But just the fact that you're adding onto your barn doesn't mean you're increasing your legal nonconformity. We look at the footprint of your confinement area.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
You will need a permit to add on to the barn, though. I guess I should note that.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add?
Hi, Avery Russell. I just had a question on what they signed. Now, is that for the house or is that the people that currently, the petitioners themselves?
So can you clarify on what they signed?
On that they're agreeing to building in an A1 district and they can't complain about cattle.
Yeah, so
or
that's
anything
gonna
like
come
that.
in two forms on this. First off, if the BZA chooses to approve that variance with the condition, they're gonna be bound that they've accepted at the BZA level. But secondly, the zoning ordinance overall, whether or not they were here, any subdivision, which is any division of land less than 20 acres, that's in the A1 district, has to place in their covenants, it's a permanent deed restriction on all future owners that prohibits them from successfully taking action against normal, generally accepted agricultural
Yeah,
activities.
that's what I was
So
trying to clarify. Is it
if they're the landowner
current
that-
or is
No,
it,
if
or
they're
the
the
house
land-
itself,
It will
no
be the
one
house
who is
itself.
there? Okay.
So the current owner, whoever plats it, will have to sign it because they're the ones accepting the deed
Correct.
restriction onto the land.
Correct.
But then it goes with the property every time it sells. It's binding on all
Gotcha.
future owners, leasers, you know, anyone who has an interest
Okay.
in that property, until or unless somebody comes back and replats it or takes action to
Okay.
remove.
That was the only
So, yeah. Nope, it's, again, not about the one person. It's about protecting ag. Yep.
I didn't actually mark on there that I wanted to talk. Can I go ahead and talk or not? Okay.
But we do need your name.
Michael Gerard, sorry. It's my understanding that the existing septic was put in before the properties were divided. I tried to talk to Rodney, I tried to talk to Nash on the actual minimum setback that a septic has to be inside the property line. I finally got the answer of 5 feet. And it has to be all of the septic system. If you come out and probe the existing septic system, part of it is less than 5 feet from my property line.
So Rodney's here, who can speak for the health department on generalities. I would note from a zoning perspective, we do have a set aside and a secondary area, but whether or not it has to be replaced, I think Rodney's better to address anything involving septic details, but.
Okay.
But that was, and then the secondary question, I don't know if Eric caught this or not, but if they're allowing for an easement across what would be Eric's driveway, what I know about septics is you can't drive a vehicle across them. So is that going to limit Eric from being able to drive back down his driveway?
It's not the septic, it would be the.
It's a
it'd be the
tile that
perimeter
would- yeah.
drain. It's just a tile.
It just carries raw water. Perimeter drains don't move sewage, they move water away from the area that treats the sewage.
But it's not like,
So
not a worry where you got to worry
it's a
about
single
crushing it
pipe, it's
with a
like
vehicle?
tiles go under, I mean, Rodney can talk more about the construction, but tiles go under roads, things that carry water, there's ways to protect. But in terms of what the health department allows, that's a Rodney question.
Okay.
Wait just a second. Rodney, could you explain a little bit of that? What we were asking here on the 5 foot and some of the other stuff, please?
I didn't catch your name.
Michael Gerard.
And if you say you did speak to me, correct? Okay. Because you said you tried to, so.
I said I talked to you.
Yeah, okay,
And I talked to Nash.
right. So, again, I have not been to this property. Nash has been. He's at conference right now. However, it is a standing rule that it is a 5 foot separation between any property line and any portion of a septic system. I'm not sure where your property is in relation to this map,
I'm the property just east of it.
just east of it, okay.
Or sorry, just west, sorry.
Just west.
I know, we're all turned around.
This is your property,
Yes.
okay. And these lots are included in his property, correct?
No, just one of
This one is, right?
Yep.
That one and that one are the only two that
Okay.
were discussed.
So from what I'm looking at from the original installation, again, I'll I don't know if you had privy to any of this at some point or not. This is what was originally installed there. This is what we have on record.
There's
So what are
a
you-
pipe that comes out from here up to here that is over closer to the property line.
Pipe from the D-box to the tank, you're
Yes.
saying?
The actual, the D-box from the tank set west of the trailer. Yeah, correct.
Okay, yes, okay.
And then the fingers.
Septic.
And
So the fingers do still come this way,
Sure.
but there's a pipe that comes out the backside that comes across that, if you probe it,
This,
Is
this
less
stuff
than-
here, Rodney, is actually set over this way. It's not actually in line with the end of the
Okay,
trailer. or
so,
anything like that.
and your claim is it's within 5 feet of the property
the
line?
D-box itself is barely 5 feet,
Okay,
and the pipes are on,
Within-
Septic lid is within, is exactly fine.
clean out and the D-box are both, because the D-box is currently dug up and exposed.
okay.
And those two are exactly 5 feet from the property line, but there's pipes that come out the backside of the D-box toward my property and run parallel to my property that are less than the 5 feet.
I guess I would question, what would those pipes be for? Because they're not part of what was the
They're-
original installation.
For the D-box and septic. They've been probed.
Well, what I'm saying is, you see what's here on the,
I understand what's
Yeah.
on the paper, yeah, but that's.
and this
not-
is what was approved by a prior
Yeah, I'm
department,
not
so I mean, you know,
I'm
I
not
was,
disputing that.
yeah, I wasn't
but
here.
I just, his concern is what is there now.
Exactly.
Yeah, so. yeah.
So I guess I'd have to come out and take a look and see why there's an additional pipe running somewhere, because everything should be running the other way. And I don't understand why there'd be anything running that other way at all. It may be that,
It doesn't run that way.
Doesn't
It
run straight
runs-
to me.
it
It
runs
comes out,
with-
turns, and runs parallel to the exit property line,
okay, so it's perimeter drain?
maybe. I
Okay,
don't know.
okay.
I don't,
There's no perimeter drain on that stuff.
There, according to the plan there is, it was required. And that perimeter drain goes around and is even out further than what
That
this,
would have to sit within.
I don't know. I mean, again, I was not there when this was installed, so
I guess
yeah.
I'm just asking, that perimeter drain would also have to set.
5
with-
feet.
5 feet from the property line, which would also move your septic tank, your D-box, and your fingers that way. correct?
So I've got a question along those lines. So are we saying that the perimeter drain is part of the system itself?
Yes.
Okay,
But I don't know what the rules were in 1995 as to whether that changed from here to now. I'm telling you what the current offsets are. I'm not sure if there's been any property changes in the lineage since then either. I'm just going based off of what we have on record
sure.
and what was at that time approved to be put in. So, so I'm just like anyone else here in this room right now. I'm subject to be able to look and see what you see. And I'm not just, I would be concerned if it was more of that than it would be the perimeter drain. Because the perimeter drain carries only groundwater away from the entire area. But I understand it, you know, it's a situation where if it's a technical, something that I would have to come out there, we might have to have it further probed or excavated. It could just as either be, unless you see it connected to the D-box, do you see it coming out of the D-box?
You can probe it.
You're probing it straight from the D-box. I mean, you say the D-box,
you can
the
probe it.
D-box is exposed, so if it's exposed, then you should be able to see that pipe that you're talking about that's somewhere out there. Otherwise, it may just be an extraneous pipe that's not even.
I can say from, I've put in septics,
I've inspected
I mean-
hundreds of them, so
I've
right now.
inspected septics
Yeah,
that I've put
so
in.
I'm asking
So-
you, if
so
it's,
yes,
if you don't
from-
see it coming, this is a 6-hole D-box. Okay? So if you don't see that pipe coming out of that D-box directly, then I'm not certain how it could be connected to the system, other than the perimeter drain. And I'd be more than glad to come out and look at that. But it is a 6-hole D-box, which means we have the pipe coming in, the pipes all going out to the field.
2 4s on the north side, two 4s on the, it'd be the east side, and 2 4s on the south side.
Mhm. So like I say, you would see something connected to it if indeed it's exposed. That's all I'm asking.
You can't see inside the D-box, right?
Okay. Like I say, I'd be more than willing to come out if necessary.
Question
Look.
for clarity for our end, just for seeing on the board side. So let's just say for the sake of discussion, because obviously there's 2 possibilities. Either
Sure.
you go out there and you determine it's fine, or maybe you research the rules and discover it was fine at the time, and therefore you can't require it to be changed because the rules changed, not
Right.
the installation,
Right.
whatever. Or you determine that there's a violation, in which case I assume they wouldn't be allowed to use that system, or they'd have to modify it. Is the set-aside area adequate for something to then serve that does meet the setbacks? Or is there, because I guess the question, just for the sake of clarity for the board, is there a way that a septic can serve this, even if that system, the permits end up revoked for because there's something wrong with the setback?
Yeah, the set-aside is large enough to support a brand-new system, so.
Curious is if a new system is, the area is large enough for another system. You can't use the existing system because of the problems. We're just assuming. Okay, so we've got enough room for one more system to be put in.
Right.
What if that fails?
Well,
We don't have the room for another system.
how
You see what
many,
I'm saying? It's 3/4 of an acre.
how many contingencies are we gonna ask the
I don't
property
know.
owner to
I
have?
really don't know. I
I mean, I'll be honest, I own 40 acres, and if my system failed, I don't have anywhere to put a new one. I'd have to pump it because elevations put me in the road.
right.
So, I mean,
You know, what do we do?
I mean, at some point, the answer is a countywide sewer district, but nobody wants the taxing rate, right? So
To
like.
be honest with you, we don't require most
You know.
home builders to have a set-aside for new.
No, it's not a normal thing unless we have a reason to be particularly concerned that there's limited options.
Okay.
So this, it's not normal to make everybody figure out a set aside. It was relevant in this case because of lot size.
Yeah, so I
Rodney,
mean,
am I hearing, is there some question about the 5-foot setback then?
not a question in my mind as to what the rule is, but I wasn't here when this was inspected for its
Okay.
final inspection, nor was my staff.
Will the new set aside area still meet that requirement?
Yes, it would, yes,
would?
it would.
Okay.
And it would be on the whole opposite side of the
Yes, it'd be on
property
the
from
opposite
this
side,
particular
running-
house
running
we're
a
concerned
different direct-
about.
Yeah.
I've got a question for Rodney, I guess, and maybe for you too. The perimeter drain for the new set aside, what's the, as far as going through an easement or under an easement, what do we do, what do we do there?
So a driveway easement, you cannot obstruct driving, but unless the easement specifically is recorded, limiting other activities are not limited. So he can't pump it over the top of the drive and block it. He can't cause a
But if
collapse or
that's a
obstruct it.
legal easeway,
We cannot find that it's legally recorded. We actually believe it's prescriptive, meaning that it existed, and when people divided property, they didn't create an actual easement, so no one can block him, but he doesn't have a written easement that says, normally driveway easements, when we plat them, do not prohibit utilities and other things from crossing them underground. That's not a normal situation, but for it to be that way, you would have to have a recorded easement where that right was specifically given from the owner, because Burns and the farm owner, Ritchie's, they own the ground under that drive half and half.
Right.
So if they, as owners, specifically gave the landowner behind the right to prohibit anything from crossing that, whether above or below ground, then that would hold. But if they did not give it, and they only gave the right of access to drive through, well, then they're not allowed to stop the access, but there's nothing that prohibits them from taking an overhead electrical or an underground electrical or a water line or anything
so
else
if that were
underneath.
Eric's legal easement, then they would need permission from Eric to excavate under that.
Eric doesn't
Only-
own that land.
Only if it is specific in the easement
Yeah.
that is
The
recorded.
written easement would have to give him the rights
And
above
there-
and below, which there is no written
Yeah, that's
easement we
what-
can find. We
yeah.
think it's prescriptive, which is common. People buy and sell land and they don't think to create a legal easement, and so then two people get in a feud about who puts their driveway gravel in if they share a drive and someone has to work it out in court. But we found no, unless, I mean, he's here, so if he says he has a legal easement and he can produce it and it specifically says that Burns and Ritchie's gave up all rights above and below, then that would change the conversation, but we could not find a recorded easement, so that would mean that the only right that exists is the prescriptive right for him to drive through it, which cannot be obstructed. So they couldn't decide to run a water pipe 1 foot above the driveway that obstructed that neighbor from driving, but
And then, so I guess my other question, Rodney, is with the septic system being here, correct?
Yes.
How do they build a house that is required for them to build back here on this lot without being on that septic?
What's their setback?
50 foot from the road.
Okay.
So the trailer that was there before actually sits further back than the required setback.
And then this, it's gotta come, how much off the west property line?
Hang on, we've got east and west all confused here.
5 feet.
West is on this side, so you're 15 foot for the side setback, and then off the easement of access, which if I'm thinking correctly is on the west side, it's a 50-foot setback. Normally, they're requesting a variance to sit at 35 foot, which is further away than the existing garage, which they'd like to remove, but not as far back as the full 50. So
Do you still have the buildable, like a thing with the setbacks? I guess for Rodney.
So you're asking
Visual.
you're asking me a question that she has to answer. My
No, this is for
installers,
you.
as long as we make sure that they're not on the existing septic, it's not my problem how they're gonna put the
Yeah,
house
so
up.
I want you to look at this and say, okay, here's the current, how,
yeah, so somebody's gonna have to help me with math. 158 feet minus 50 feet, oh, I don't need help, is 108. So he's got 108 feet of width in which to fit a house, and then just relative to setbacks, now there's a septic back here over part of this, but he's got a total of 270 foot of total depth. He loses 50 foot, so he has 200 and, oh, somebody help.
220.
270, thank you. 220 foot of depth. Now he's gonna lose some of that in the back to the septic.
and the set aside, which is
The set
right
aside
over
is up here, back in this corner.
Yeah.
It's right here, yeah.
So,
Right in here.
yeah, the set aside
So-
is back.
so-
No, it's back here.
It runs this
Because he
direction.
has these two lots,
Yeah.
so it sits right in. And
Okay.
he's planning to place his house with the back along the old trailer,
Mm-hmm.
and then sitting in here and across part of where you take out that building, be further back than where that sits, but
So
not
the
50
the setback area, again, is right in here.
no, the setback
No,
is the
setback.
first 50 foot from the
Yeah.
road, right here, the first 15 foot from this lot line. The back, where we are, the back 20 foot here, and then assuming no variance, 50 foot from this easement of access.
Correct.
If he gets a variance at 35, now this building doesn't have to be torn down. If he doesn't get the variance, that's legal non-conforming, he can leave it and attach to it on the other side, but if he tears it down, then he needs the variance.
So is this right here, this rectangle?
Okay,
This is the area in which he can build,
Okay.
if he gets the 35
just
foot
wait for the.
variance. Now,
If-
if he
if
doesn't,
he gets-
then he's only gonna have like 80 foot of width, which
Okay.
is still adequate
Okay.
for a house.
So again, the buildable area, the current septic system
Now, I
is
would
in the
know,
buildable area.
if he abandons this septic and he puts a new septic over here, he doesn't have to stay out of
Should we
that
get into
legally
it?
Right.
for us, so
Right.
he's then gonna gain more space, but
So I guess
What?
to build a lot here, or to build here,
I think you're gonna have to get
it's
control
gonna
of
be
this.
a conflict with
Mr.
the current
President.
septic.
So I would argue that that's.
Because the board's just sitting here.
We've issued permits for houses that are 20 by 30. No question.
I don't
that
think
would
it's
fit
fair to
3
everybody
times
else either.
We've also issued houses like Jackson Farms that are a ton of square footage and are more than 100 foot in one direction and,
Right.
50 foot in the other direction. That would definitely not fit here. Your average 3-bedroom, 2-bath, you're probably looking at something 30 to 40 foot in
Which-
width or depth in this case, and 60 to 80 foot in length. That would seem to fit, but at the end of the day, it's the builder's problem how to
Yeah.
fit their house in the
Right.
lot.
So the-
An 800 square foot house, which is the minimum required in the ordinance, would fit on this lot, in my opinion.
So with the whole footprint of the septic, you include the perimeter drain, the chambers, the tank, the D-box, everything, it still becomes a conflict with the current septic.
So you're saying the space between the back of that trailer and the back of this lot, you do not
No,
believe
no, no, no,
is
no, no.
adequate?
No. I'm saying the new buildable area with all of the requested setbacks.
Right, but he doesn't then build a house over the entire buildable area, that's just the area in which he can choose to build a house.
I know. I'm saying that septic system, the current septic system is majority of that buildable area.
That doesn't matter as long as he can still fit the house and the rest.
So you can build a house over the current
Yeah,
septic?
Okay, hey,
Can't.
hey,
You
but-
can't, but that's
hey,
not, I mean.
Liz,
Yeah,
Liz. We're
I'm
gonna
good.
entertain a motion right now because I think there's a lot of discussion about this right now. Scott, would you, explain your, motion?
Well, I think what would be best is if we had you go out and actually talk with them at the site, make sure everything is cool so that the board understands clearly what's going on.
Sure.
And I'm
I
happy
will-
to
I
go
will-
out with you
I
and
will
actually
point out, I
measure
don't
from
have the
the,
ability to excavate anything any further. I'm only gonna be able to look at what we can see,
Sure.
okay?
I just think it would
Yeah.
help for everybody's clarification.
I can also measure from the back of the old trailer site to where the back of the 50-foot setback is to verify for
Yeah.
sure the remaining width.
But I have no problem with going, I mean, I think my inspector's already been out there and made it clear what we feel, but I'll be more than glad to go out again.
Yeah.
I will point out that probing something when you're hitting something underground is not a definitive of anything.
On a building lot, especially that
Yeah.
has previous dis-
Now, if it was
construction.
excavated, that's different, but then that would be in reverse of what we see as our record, where another inspector went out when it was originally installed. So therefore, if something's been modified in between those times, my office nor Liz's isn't necessarily privy to that anyway.
I mean, I guess I kinda wanted to
No, you're,
stop this a little
you're
bit
fine.
because I felt like we
feel
were
like it would
spinning
be
our
more
wheels.
clear if we measured it.
And
No question.
I think our board has sat here and listened to this enough, and I guess we're all a glutton for punishment a little bit. But, I came into this meeting, tonight, and I'll just voice my opinion. I came into this meeting, we had the things that we asked for, and kinda wanted to resolve it tonight. And, we've uncovered some other stuff, which I don't necessarily know is necessarily all that relevant to this. I mean, things that, and I guess I'm opening it up to board discussion. If there's somebody that really wants to say something super important, you've got 2 minutes.
I've got one question. R1 setback versus A1 setback on drain systems, is it the same?
There's no difference because the setback's not from a property line, it's from a house wall to an edge of the confinement area. So the zoning district doesn't, the only bearing it would have is if you're zoned R1, your actual property, then you have to get special permission for livestock, whereas if you're zoned A1, you have to get special permission for a house. So it just reverses which thing needs permission.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any effect on the setbacks.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you.
Same thing if there was a windmill or a solar panel or any other thing that has a reciprocal setback. The zoning district wouldn't change the setback. The setback is absolute to the uses.
Hey, can you go up real quick? Yep.
Full disclosure, Mindy and Norm's my stepdad, Mindy's my mom, but from a builder's perspective of somebody
What's
that's
your
pulled.
name?
Austin Walker, I'm sorry, thanks. Pulled several permits recently, building a house in the county right now. There's concerns with the existing septic, that's fine, they've already satisfied that there's a set aside for another septic. I don't really see, I guess, what the concern would be or to issue another stay on that, just pending what this one is.
Yep.
That's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Austin. Anybody else got anything else? I want to,
I guess I'll also add, I've never been required to have a set-aside area. Now, I've never issued it on a lot this small, so I understand it. But
Sure.
I think that's being overly cautious, I guess, and it's been satisfied.
yep. Let's close it up to just board discussion now. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is the birds have came through and given the set aside area. We've got the perimeter drain issue. You know, I really think the variance number 2 on the CFO is somewhat of a non-issue. I know it's a little restrictive on one side of the property for the Barretts and that family. But I think you've got enough houses that are sitting there that if, you know, a major CFO expansion were to happen, it's not. I'm going to go back to what I said at the first meeting in that, you know, we're not taking out any tillable ground here. That ground is going to sit here regardless of what happens tonight. That ground's either going to become a house or it's going to sit there with a garage. Maybe not get destroyed and taken care of. You know, I understand all your guys' concerns. I really do. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the Burns have done what they need to do to make this happen, and have done it in a timely manner. I'd entertain anybody else's discussion or 2 cents on this, but I guess I kind of leave it out on how I feel about this. And I'd like to get it resolved tonight, because if we don't have any filings in October, that would be great. They'll be in the fields.
So the fact that we're going for variances and special exceptions make it so that we have all the issues that are of major concern brought to us and that we can address them. And the first meeting, those concerns came out. We wanted to address them with facts and with knowledgeable people that know the things that we may not know. I think that if you look at it with honesty, we are protecting the CFO more with this house than what we are with the existing homes that are there. And the request to address the concerns have even gone beyond what is normal when we have a set aside put on the property for an additional septic system. We've heard from the fire people, probing we heard tonight is not necessarily 100% indicative, but we have people that are willing to go out there and just make sure everything is correct yet. I think we've addressed the issues and had the experts looking at it and did a very fine job with addressing them and making provisions.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree, that in my mind, the concern with approval is, as we talked about, the alternate septic site, right?
Yep.
And I agree that that's not normally part of the discussion, but in this case, the board would be granting a variance, and I would not want to have an old septic that doesn't have room to be fixed in case that happens. And I think we've clarified that can be taken care of. So it seems to me the only thing that's been called into question is, does perimeter drains, finger systems, et cetera, all the way around the property meet required setbacks? If we don't know that, then we probably should address that before the board makes a decision. If we're 100% confident of that, then I think the board can probably do that.
So I guess, Scott, we could make, so the way staff said it, was to put a condition of a plan set aside area for a septic in case the current one were to fail. If we put the provision in that fail or be non-compliant, that would be an added set of words that we could put in there.
I would say
correct?
per the health department, because it's,
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a situation where I have all kinds of people calling me, trying to get me to figure out a septic. I'm not trained, I don't.
Sure.
Like, we don't have any staff that can, if the health department gives us approval, state law says they're the ones that handle that. So that would be my only request, is that if you're gonna, I think it's not a bad idea to add. It helps give extra protection, but I would prefer that to make it clear who's making that determination, so that, whatever they determine then is what it goes by.
So then I got one more question about that. So if that septic was found non-compliant by today's standards, it's still sitting there, it's still working. How do we move forward there? I don't know.
Let me answer it this way. At the time it was installed, it was approved by our department. During this period of time, that whatever existing rules were in place, can't change those.
Yep.
That would be ridiculous. We would be doing that to everybody around the county, and that's a heinous cost to somebody for no reason. I want to go back to the idea, probing, otherwise, whatever it is, this was approved by our department in 1995. There's no reason to question at that time that it was within compliance.
So we can't go back.
We cannot.
We can only just go off of what was done. That's what I wanted
Yeah,
clarification.
We can't change what was, okay, well, that's a 10-foot setback, but it used to be 5. Well, then what are we gonna do? Say everything's non-compliant when it really truly was at that point in time?
Yep. Okay.
So it works like a legal nonconformity,
Sure.
that if something was legal then and then the rules
Sure.
change.
In that time period, the square footage required for a soil absorption field is half of what is required now. So, things change over time, and we can't retroactively go back and try to regulate it based off of that now. It was approved by our department at that time.
But to be clear, the set-aside area is adequate to meet all current rules,
Certainly it is.
which a
Today's-
replacement system would have to
Because
meet.
we're
Yeah.
using current data, we're using current.
So really what we're talking about with the existing site is even if it's non-compliant within the setback, it was approved at that time.
And it was compliant at that point.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That's clear. Yeah.
That's what I wanted you to say, is that, so I don't even know if we have to put that in, Scott. If it's under compliance of when it was installed,
Well, I guess it'd be kind of silly.
that's kind of way I think, and it
I mean,
opens Liz's office to more.
I would note at the end of the day, no matter what you say, if the health department separately goes in and determines that system cannot be reused, we don't get any say in that.
Yeah.
They
Exactly.
then refuse to issue a permit until they have an adequate alternate plan. We're banned from issuing the building permit until we get the health department septic permit. So I guess I would note, regardless, not just in this, but in any situation, if the health department determines a system doesn't work, or is in failure, we don't second guess that. We abide by their authority in the matter. So even if you don't have something there, if they were to go out there following up on this and probe and determine that something had happened that created an issue, they still have the authority to say, nope, something has to change, or you've got to go put it in the set aside. You can't, they have that authority regardless.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you. Any more board discussion?
No, I would just be repeating what you guys thought.
Okay. Well, I'm ready to make a motion. I move to approve application CC 2024-00851, docket number 24-24-VA, and approve all 3 variances according to the findings in the staff report, which are incorporated in this motion by reference, with the conditions: a plan of a set-aside area for the septic in case of the current one were to fail, for variance number 1. For variance number 2, we'll carry the condition that the petitioners will forego any objection to an existing CFO making expansions
And future property owners.
and future property owners.
And we can carry that across, that additional about expansions across into the subdivision language too.
I'll second.
Who was that?
Grant. I'll take a roll call vote when you're ready.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
You're fine.
I guess there is some merit while I'm writing to asking the applicant to make sure in the case of the expansions that they agree to that, because they are gonna have to sign off on it at the subdivision stage.
Are you guys okay with those conditions?
Talking about for the CFO.
CFO, yeah.
That you and future owners would not just forgo the right to sue about normal stuff, but you would forgo the right to object should he expand towards your property.
I've lived there 50 years and I've never whined about anything, so.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
And the October 1st meeting, solar farm.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
Well, you
different.
didn't want to have an October meeting.
Well, no, they'll have it.
That's APC.
That's ABC. He's on two different boards. He's the APC representative to the BZA. All right, I think I'm ready to do a roll call. So, this is for all three variances. Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Grant Moeller,
Yes.
Stacy Pedigo,
Yes.
Scott Hudsonsberger,
Yes.
and Chester Bankus.
Yes.
Okay. Approved 5-0. So then, obviously, the two of you that sat on APC are gonna see this when it comes through on the subdivision side, and so I would tell you, like myself, to keep an eye on making sure we've got everything carried across and the covenants reflecting the BZA conditions, and on the plat, it should show the set aside, so it's permanent. It can't be part of the building envelope.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. No other public hearings this month. New business.
I don't
Okay.
think I have anything.
Other than our meeting on the 22nd.
Oh.
But we would have to move it if we have any filings.
We
And
don't
being-
have filings right now.
Not yet, but we have a 20-day
Okay.
deadline. Now,
Sure.
that said, being mindful of the fact that a number of board members are involved in agriculture and it will be harvest, my intention would be to make that a hard cutoff, as opposed to when we sometimes take late filings.
Sure.
So, and Kat and I already talked about the fact that if we get a filing which is a standards variance and does not have objectors, we'll try to handle that by hearing officer rather than calling a meeting, so that
Okay.
we can keep everybody in the field. But obviously, if we get a special exception, that's, then we'll have to deal with
Beyond our
that.
control.
Yep, we'll do what we can.
So our next meeting, regular meeting, will be October 22nd, 2024, if we have any filings.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, we're adjourned.
Who was asking about the solar hearings?
Jack there.
Jack
Okay,
Barrett.
I want to make sure I convey that.
You going fishing with that hat?
Always. It's my party hat.
You guys get crazy out there by Colfax and Fickle.
It's wild on the west side.
Thank you.
What's for dinner tonight?
Thank you for taking.
I don't even know. The hot dogs at the ball game that might already be over.
Thank you.
That's what I figured before Aaron had to sit through this.
Thank you for your
What do
help.
you need to talk to us about?
I'm sick and tired of getting calls from Tim Simpson about water. Thank you for coming tonight, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Take care, have a good evening. Something's gotta be done. I mean, this guy,
Here's our, we just don't have
Jay
any.
needs to go back to work. What did they tell them when we originally declared that unfit? Well, we ain't living there. Well, they are living there, so something's got to be
We don't
done.
have proof. I mean, how am I supposed to get proof?
Well,
That's
again,
that's what I talked to Jay about.
what is it?
That's
This
exactly.
guy's gonna keep haranguing us, and, well, he's done it, he's out on the side of the property line again.
Well, I don't control those.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is, we can declare it unfit, we still have declared it, I don't know what happens in what state we're in.
My part is the required, the only thing that I have in there
It's all the trash.
is the trash and junk
It's
and
fine.
debris. We got no other all those vehicles, campers, or
It's fine.
and when you went back with it, you went out there with they went out there and you went through the buffer yard or whatever, and you said at that time that to you, it did not look like they had it. I don't have any other, I don't
Okay, well, we're gonna go back to it.
Those buffer yards should be in government program, because those are required because of the solar farm.
I've had just.
But you can't put them in there. I've already
I don't
checked
know
those.
what else to do.
But the government
Well,
says
this all look like.
if it is approved, and they're doing it in several other
He
states.
doesn't see
But I
it.
guess I put this way right now.
Here's my
That
question, here's my question. We would be required to sign, and anybody else that's got this, is it okay if we just walk right on their property and start demanding to go through all the rules every time? I mean, he would
So
not
you're
like
saying
it if I did
they're
that.
smarter than the
And that's what
federal
he's
government.
expecting. He's
Because they're
expecting
saying you
me
cannot
to go out
mow
there and
during
sit
the nesting.
24/7.
Law enforcement.
It needs to know it's gonna be. I'll tell you that right now, it's already.
The solar farm is paying for that as part of their lease
Well,
area.
claim that
Or
it's
you have it
not
over
case,
down
this guy
panels,
was
they're
gonna
required
have
to
to
maintain it.
maintain it.
Ordinance changes would have to be
It's
made.
just like, it doesn't mean I
That don't
can't
make a
sue
whole lot of sense to me.
board
And
and
somebody
each
needs to give us some
individual
records.
because of planting trees when I
Sure,
have.
I can't do nothing.
I mean,
course,
saying
when I
that
have
we're required to
septic,
sue them for not
records.
maintaining it when they got the approval.
Try to let-
Because they should
But I
not
can
have
sue
understood
because
it.
you're forcing me to put trees on my side where I, oh, yes, you are.
The solar company should be paying you for this variance. They
That's,
should be.
that's right.
So they're
But-
theirs to maintain.
But I've got tile,
And if I
system
can't
tile
get
that I know in
everybody to get on
25
board
years
with
what
me,
those trees are gonna
I
do,
don't have a
what the roots are
problem
gonna
walking
do.
the
So you
department,
guys,
but then,
as a board,
you
has
know,
made the decision
kinda get
that
this trying to
the
love
commissioners
your
and you
end
guys know
by
more
yourself,
about
and
it
I'm standing
than
there
what
and
I
you
do.
guys don't pay payments, you know?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
And the
well,
government
just,
should.
I mean, I guess I
When
don't
does
wanna
common
sound,
sense come into play and this
if you're
individual
receiving a
has
lease
to
payment, you
prove
should
that
have
he has some
negotiated in
else
your
he's living
lease
in?
a different arrangement, and you should have brought that, they should have brought that before the
Because
board
he-
as a different
never
arrangement.
provided.
it has been
Yes,
brought up.
Yes.
So,
What?
Many of the
Provided
people
us
on board
an
are
address
farmers, they know what
that he
the
Of a
trees
family member
do
that
25
claims he's
years.
living?
Yeah.
but
And I,
that's no longer part
that
of
doesn't
it. I
mean,
mean, that's
hey,
the
it's a
problem.
free country, I'm just telling you, I can sue and
And the
legal
court will have
result,
to
and
decide what is the ordinance
absolutely,
and the need.
Well, I
and
know
it's gonna
that.
happen.
But that means.
I'd rather
that he's living in
spend
And likewise,
structures.
$1 million doing that than I would for another 80 acres.
And
That's the
likewise,
whole
we have
problem.
landowners that have been a great thing to come and they will sue
There,
us if we don't
even be
enforce
showing
showing
up out
So
there and
as
saying,
court's
I'm
gonna
gonna
have
come
to
on
figure
your
it out
property.
if.
That's right,
we
it'll
know
have to be the
everybody-
courts to
and
do
if
it.
It's not my
And then
personal
they're
issue,
gonna
I'm
go,
required to do what
what,
the ordinance says and what
Well, no, no.
code, you know, the
It's
hearings
not-
say.
Do
So
you have?
if
Well,
they
if
want
you
something
could.
different, they need to come
I
through and get
can't
variances.
enforce that.
And they need to
I
come
am
through
not
and revise the
comfortable.
development plan
And I
to
done
that
already
degree.
told her,
And
whenever somebody comes down and
effective
says, I
landowners
have to
nearby
start
need to not
inspecting
object,
feces,
because
I'm
ultimately the
gone.
buffer yards are there to
Is that,
protect them.
no.
You know, they're not there to protect.
I do not have the authority,
It's
I
a
don't.
concession that allowed it to be approved in the first
To do
place.
it.
And
Then
I've
we're gonna be
got,
like,
I've got trees
whose
all along
feces
one
is
side
it?
that,
It doesn't matter.
there's no one there.
Not supposed to.
That's
Well,
what I don't
That's the thing,
understand.
granted, we had like 8 requests,
Is there a-
situations like
is there a
that, that
difference
variances were
between
granted for, and that's
Oh, yeah.
exactly what
And
happened.
see, I don't know these
So if
things.
you didn't have that
Pathogens
conversation
are
with the solar farm,
being-
you
I don't
brought it
know
to
these
us,
things.
we can't
Well,
apply for
it's-
variances for the solar farm, and
How's,
you guys
what's
have
the
to bring
possibility
that.
that Jay
So
can help
we
us
can-
with getting
we
the
can
declaration
apply
so it
for
can be
variances
boarded
Solar
out?
farm,
on the trees.
it
What
has to
be
the
boarded
solar farm
up?
to do it, because their
The
project
building,
and they're
so that someone
responsible.
can't keep going in
But
and
they
out of
can
it all
apply
the
for
time.
variances, and they've done it in like 9 cases now.
Because
We've
if I
granted
declare
I guess like, we gotta
Put a good chunk, we
provide
have a landowner
proof
pulling
as to
stuff
why
out
we're boarding
who's
it
just
up. We have problems, we did not grant those, there was no purpose for them.
It's not, we
But we did grant, we had a couple
can't
farmers with
afford it
trees
for
in the way of
because it's
tiles, we
not
had a couple
a
farmers with trees in the way of
residential
access
So-
areas.
But it's
We
being
granted all of those and exchanged it out
Are
for
they
increasing
living
the
in those
density on
trailers?
either side of the plantings and shifting them. Some stuff
But
can
I
be done
can't just walk
administratively,
out
it's just
there
a
and
narrow
walk in. I
area that
have
needs
to
to be
be
opened up
invited onto
without
their
needing to
property.
go through a variance process. But I have not had any
No
conversations
matter
with
how,
Party
no
Hills
matter how many
on
complaints you
your
get, you
land.
can't go in.
That has not been the list they
Can't
brought
walk
to
on
us
the
that said,
property.
hey, we have been asked by the landowner to pursue variances
unless
here,
I have
and here's what we need to where we
permission,
can
and
even
that's
have a
what I keep trying to
conversation.
tell
So
I
that,
can't go out there and
I
say,
can't just walk onto anybody's
I've
property.
made
You
close to
wouldn't like
400
it if I walked
variances,
on
you
his
now have to
property.
apply, I mean, I don't have
I'll
that
tell you
authority,
what.
they have to decide what they
If he
need
wants to go there.
as the responsible party and then come to us, and then we have to look at each case and decide whether to grant it or not. So we had 10 requests that came to the BZA.
But
I'm working from memory, but I think they granted 6 and denied.
This guy just
everybody
keeps
trying
calling
They
us and
granted
it's
7
like,
and
dude,
they got mad
I
that
told
worked.
you
They
everything.
denied a couple, there was one where a landowner
I went through it.
was
I've
affected
gone through
with
it
a
with him as
specific
well.
objection, and the alternative was worked out, that worked for the farmer's access and
I
worked
went
for
as
the
far
owner,
as
and
the
the
marshal
didn't need a
calling me,
variance to
telling
do,
me,
so
hey,
that
well,
amendment will
this
be
guy
made in the
just
development
testified in
plan,
court
but the
and he
variance
lives
was
there.
denied, and the alternative
Okay,
agreement
well,
was
let's get
followed.
the, hey Jay,
to
let's
the
get those
access while
transcripts.
not
So we- Oh, no, well,
eliminating the
they
screening
signed
of
it
your
out.
house. So, I mean, there, we had some of those.
They're protected. I'm like,
But also on this
that's the
border
same
that
court
we
we
talked
likely
about.
just had
I
them
can
in
think
when they
for
were
them,
nine, they lived there.
So
When
if
does
it's
this get
farmed,
logical?
then it's not required to be
Okay,
done.
what's,
But you
what's the
cannot
difference
really-
if it's in
That particular
government
case, but
ground,
not for
that the
one
government, the
we
federal
had.
government doesn't want you to mow from
No,
spring
and
until
that-
the
August
difference is
month?
it's an agricultural crop, not a required buffer yard.
Because he
So
claimed he wasn't
we'd
living
have to
there.
look at your exact
And
area.
then he turns around in court, the
But
same court.
it's-
And same thing, if I, when I done it, and it'd be more than
I can't.
Okay.
I don't
8 or
know what
12
to do
inches
about
tall
getting the
before I
records
cut it.
pulled in.
Yeah, so
Same
I asked
difference.
Jay,
under the panels, like in those areas, if it's an
I asked him
agricultural
this,
crop, then it
I
doesn't
asked
have to be the
Jay.
pollinator friendly. Item, if it's a
But that would
required
be-
buffer yard, which has to be a
And that's
certain
when he told
width,
me, oh, no, they-
and a
they
certain amount of
signed
plantings, then it has to be
clause
maintained, and those
they
plantings have to be
testified
taken
that
care of by the
they-
solar farm. Now,
you
they have an
serious?
exchange they can make, they chose to
The
go
one
with
time
wider
to tell
buffer
the
yards
truth,
for less
we give them
plantings.
anonymity.
They can